The galaxy had known peace for 10,000 years. The Galactic Council, a union of 47 spacefaring species, had maintained order through diplomacy, trade agreements, and mutual respect. Wars were things of ancient history, spoken of only in educational programs and museum exhibits. No living being in the known universe had ever witnessed true conflict. Then the Vorthon came. They emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies, from regions so distant that no telescope had ever detected their home systems. Their ships were black as the void itself, shaped like massive thorns that pierced through space with terrible purpose. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed. The first world to fall was Kalar Prime, home to the gentle Kalari people. The Kalari were scientists and philosophers, beings of light blue skin and 4 eyes that had spent millennia studying the mysteries of the universe. They had no weapons. They had no military. When the Vorthan ships descended upon their planet, the Kalari could only watch in horror as their cities burned and their people were taken. Those who were captured were never seen again. The Council received only one transmission from Kalar Prime before it went silent forever. A single image of Vorthon soldiers dragging Kalari families into dark transport ships. The galaxy was shocked. In all their recorded history, nothing like this had ever occurred. Emergency sessions were called. Representatives from all 47 species gathered on the Council homeworld of Nexus Station, a massive space structure that orbited a peaceful yellow star. The Great Chamber, designed to hold thousands, was filled with beings of every shape and color. Some floated in anti-gravity fields. Others sat in specialized chairs designed for their unique bodies. All of them were afraid. High Chancellor Morveth, a being of the ancient Thessian race, called for order. The Thessians were tall and slender, with silver skin that reflected light like polished metal. They had founded the Council and had led it for generations. Morveth was considered the wisest being in known space, but even he did not know what to do. "We must respond," declared Ambassador Crix of the Velari Collective. The Velari were insectoid beings with compound eyes and chitinous shells. They were among the more aggressive species in the Council, known for their territorial disputes over asteroid mining rights. The Vorthon have committed an act of war. We cannot simply watch as they destroy our member worlds. Respond with what? Asked Delegate Soom of the Aquari Federation. Soom spoke through a translator device as his species communicated through complex patterns of bioluminescence. The Aquari lived in vast ocean worlds and rarely traveled in dry environments. We have no weapons. We have no soldiers. Our security forces are designed to handle criminals and disputes, not invading armies. This was the terrible truth that hung over the assembly. The Council species had evolved beyond warfare. Their technology was focused on exploration, medicine, communication, and the improvement of life. They had matter replicators that could create any food or material. They had faster-than-light travel that connected thousands of worlds. They had medical technology that could extend life for centuries, but they had nothing designed to harm another living being. The Vorthon attacked again 3 days later. This time, they struck Morrow Colony, a trading post on the edge of Council space. 200,000 beings from a dozen different species lived there, conducting business and raising families in the artificial habitats that floated in orbit around a gas giant. The Vorthan fleet arrived without warning. Their weapons, which the Council scientists could not understand, tore through shields and hull plating as if they were made of paper. The colony was destroyed in less than an hour. There were no survivors. Panic spread across the galaxy. Species that had trusted in the Council for protection now realized that no protection existed. Some worlds began building shelters deep underground. Others started evacuating their populations to the most distant and hidden corners of known space. A few attempted to develop weapons, but they were starting from nothing. The Council species had no concept of military strategy, no understanding of combat, no experience with violence on any scale larger than a simple fight between individuals. The Vorthon continued their advance. They took 3 more worlds in the following month, then 5 more, then 10. Their fleet seemed endless, growing larger with each conquest. Council scouts reported that the Vorthon were using captured populations as slave labor, forcing them to build more ships, more weapons, more instruments of destruction. Every world they took made them stronger. Commander Veleth of the Thessian Defense Force, such as it was, attempted to organize a resistance. She gathered ships from across the Council, civilian vessels that were hastily fitted with whatever weapons could be created. Mining lasers were mounted on transport freighters. Asteroid processing units were converted into crude missile launchers. It was desperate and foolish, but it was all they had. The Battle of Corin's Belt was a disaster. 300 Council ships faced a Vorthon fleet of 50. The Council believed their numbers would provide an advantage. They were wrong. The Vorthon ships moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Their weapons fired in precise patterns that the Council pilots could not predict or avoid. Council ships exploded one after another, their improvised weapons barely scratching the black hulls of the enemy. Veleth herself died when her flagship was cut in half by a Vorthon beam weapon. Of the 300 ships that entered the battle, only 12 escaped. The war continued for 7 years, 7 years of running, 7 years of dying, 7 years of watching everything they had built crumble to dust. The Vorthon took world after world, system after system. The Council retreated again and again, always trying to stay one step ahead of the advancing darkness. Refugee fleets filled with billions of displaced beings wandered through space, searching for safety that did not exist. Disease spread through the overcrowded ships. Food became scarce as matter replicators failed from overuse. Beings who had lived in luxury and peace now fought each other for scraps of nutrition paste. High Chancellor Morveth aged visibly during those years. His silver skin grew dull and gray. His eyes, once bright with wisdom, became hollow with despair. He had witnessed the destruction of everything his ancestors had created. He had received death tolls that numbered in the trillions. He had watched species that had existed for millions of years vanish forever, their entire populations either killed or enslaved by the Vorthon. And still the enemy came. By the 7th year, the Council controlled less than a quarter of its original territory. The Vorthon had established a massive empire of conquered worlds. Reports from resistance cells spoke of horrors beyond imagination. The enslaved populations were worked to death in factories and mines. Those who resisted were made examples of in public executions. The Vorthon had no mercy, no compassion, no concept of negotiation. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they did not need. It was in this darkest hour that the Council received an unexpected transmission. The signal came from the far edge of explored space, from a region that had been quarantined for generations. The Council had discovered this area centuries ago, but had never made contact with its inhabitants. Initial observations had been disturbing. The natives of this region were primitive by galactic standards, still confined to a single planet, still struggling with basic problems like disease and poverty. But what truly concerned the Council was their nature. These beings were violent. Their history was filled with wars, conflicts, and acts of destruction that made the Council species recoil in horror. They fought each other constantly, developing weapons of increasing power with each generation. They had created devices that could destroy entire cities in a single explosion. They had killed members of their own species by the millions for reasons the Council could not understand. Religious differences, political ideologies, the color of their skin, the land beneath their feet. The Council had decided to leave these beings alone, hoping they would either evolve beyond their violent nature or destroy themselves before developing faster-than-light travel. Either way, the galaxy would be safer without contact. These beings called themselves humans, and they had just sent a message offering their help. Chancellor Morveth stared at the transmission for a long time. Around him, his advisors argued about what to do. Some wanted to ignore the humans entirely. Others were curious about what these primitive creatures could possibly offer. A few were genuinely afraid of inviting violent beings into council space. "They are asking to join the war," Morveth said quietly, silencing the debate. "They say they have been monitoring our conflict. They say they have developed faster-than-light travel on their own. And they say—" He paused, reading the words again as if he could not believe them. "They say they can help us win." The chamber erupted in confused noise. Win? The very concept seemed absurd. The Council had been losing for 7 years. They had tried everything they could think of. Their best minds had failed to develop effective weapons. Their bravest volunteers had died in hopeless battles. What could a single species of violent primitives possibly do against the Vorthon Armada? The human ambassador arrived at Nexus Station 3 days later. His name was Admiral James Chen, and he did not look like much. He was small compared to most council species, with pale pink skin and dark eyes that seemed to absorb everything around them. He wore a uniform of dark blue fabric decorated with small metal symbols that the council translators identified as rank insignia and campaign medals. He walked with a confidence that seemed out of place for a representative of such a young and primitive species. The council assembled to hear him speak. They expected him to beg for an alliance, to offer whatever his species could provide in exchange for protection from the Vorthon. They expected fear and desperation, the same emotions that filled every council meeting these days. Instead, Admiral Chen smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said through his translator device, "I understand you have a problem. We would like to offer a solution." He pulled a small device from his pocket and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the council chamber, images that made every being in the room fall silent with shock. "This is the human military," Chen continued calmly. "We have 15 billion soldiers across our colonial territories. We have 6,000 warships designed specifically for combat. We have weapons that can crack planets open like eggs and shields that can withstand the heat of a star." He paused, letting the images cycle through displays of massive battleships, armies of armored soldiers, and weapons platforms the size of small moons. "We have been preparing for war since we first looked up at the stars. We just didn't know who we would be fighting." The council stared at him in stunned silence. "Give us the coordinates of the Vorthon homeworld," Admiral Chen said, "and we will end this war for you." The silence in the council chamber lasted for nearly a full minute. Beings from 47 different species stared at the human admiral with expressions ranging from disbelief to terror. The holographic images continued to cycle above them, showing weapons and soldiers and warships that seemed to belong to a nightmare rather than reality. Ambassador Crix of the Valari Collective was the first to find his voice. You have prepared for war since your species began?" Admiral Chen nodded without hesitation. "Correct. Our history is filled with conflict. We have fought each other over territory, resources, beliefs, and sometimes for no reason at all. Every generation of humans has known war. Every advance in our technology has been driven, at least in part, by the desire to fight more effectively." He paused, and something dark passed behind his eyes. "We are not proud of this, but we are what we are. And right now, what we are might be exactly what this galaxy needs." High Chancellor Morveth leaned forward in his seat. His silver skin had grown even paler during Chen's presentation. "Admiral, You speak of violence on a scale we cannot comprehend. Your species has killed each other? In large numbers? Billions, Chen replied simply. Throughout our history, we have killed billions of our own kind. We invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. We created poisons that could kill every living thing on a continent. We developed biological agents that could wipe out entire populations. He met the Chancellor's horrified gaze directly. We did these things to ourselves. Imagine what we can do to those who threaten others. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Several of them looked like they wanted to flee the chamber. The images floating above them now seemed less like a military presentation and more like a warning. Delegate Soom of the Aquari Federation spoke through his translator, his bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly with anxiety. And you offer this capacity for destruction to help us? Why would you do this? What do you want in return? Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. We want nothing except the chance to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We have monitored your conflict with the Vorthan. We have seen the worlds they have destroyed, the populations they have enslaved. We know what it is like to fight an enemy that shows no mercy. His voice grew harder. And we know how to defeat such an enemy. Commander Veleth's successor, a young Thessian named Tareth, who had inherited a position no one wanted, spoke up from his seat near the front of the chamber. Our best strategists have studied the Vorthan for 7 years. We have found no weakness in their forces, no flaw in their tactics. They fight as a single coordinated unit, their ships moving in perfect harmony. How can you hope to defeat what we could not? Chen turned to face the young commander. Your strategists approached the problem like scientists. They looked for logical weaknesses, predictable patterns, mathematical solutions. He shook his head. War is not mathematics. War is chaos. War is fear and pain and confusion and anger. War is the willingness to do whatever it takes to destroy your enemy before they destroy you. Your people do not understand this, but we do. We have understood it since the first human picked up a rock and used it to crack open the skull of another human who threatened his family. The brutal simplicity of his words hung in the air like smoke. Chancellor Morveth closed his eyes for a moment, as if struggling with an internal conflict. When he opened them again, there was something new in his expression. Resignation, perhaps, or hope. It was difficult to tell. We will give you the coordinates, he said quietly. We will give you everything we know about the Vorthan fleet. Their numbers, their positions, their ship configurations. And then... He spread his hands in a gesture of surrender. And then we will pray that your violence is as effective as you claim. Admiral Chen nodded once. Have faith, Chancellor. We are very, very good at this. The human fleet arrived in Council space 4 days later. The Council species had thought they understood what a military force looked like from Chen's holographic presentation. They had been wrong. Seeing it in person was something entirely different. The first ships to emerge from hyperspace were the screening vessels, fast destroyers and frigates that swept the area for threats before the main fleet arrived. There were hundreds of them. Sleek gray shapes covered in weapons arrays and sensor domes. Behind them came the cruisers, larger and heavier, their hulls bristling with missile tubes and energy weapons. Then the battleships, massive constructs that made the Council's largest civilian transports look like children's toys. And finally, in the center of the formation, the dreadnoughts. There were 12 of these monsters, each one over 15 kilometers long. Their hulls were thick with armor plating. Their weapons could fire projectiles at nearly the speed of light. Their shields could withstand hits that would vaporize smaller ships. Each dreadnought carried enough firepower to destroy a small planet. The Council representatives who watched from Nexus Station stood in stunned silence as the fleet assembled before them. 6,000 ships in total, arranged in precise formations that spoke of decades of practice and discipline. The combined military might of humanity gathered in a single place for a single purpose. Admiral Chen's flagship, the dreadnought Terra's Vengeance, took position at the head of the formation. From its bridge, Chen observed the tactical display showing the positions of every ship under his command. Around him, his bridge crew worked with calm efficiency, running final systems checks and confirming communication links. Captain Sarah Rodriguez, his executive officer, approached with a datapad in her hand. "Admiral, we've received the Vorthon coordinates from the Council. Their main fleet is concentrated around a system called Nexar Prime, approximately 40 light-years from here. Intelligence estimates between 800 and 1,000 enemy ships." Chen nodded slowly, studying the star charts on his display. "And their home world?" "Beyond Nexar Prime, another 60 light-years into the dark region. The Council's information is limited, but they believe the Vorthon have multiple homeworlds, possibly connected by some kind of gate network. Then we take Nexar Prime first." Chen tapped a command into his console, opening a channel to all ships in the fleet. "This is Admiral Chen to all vessels. Our mission is simple. We advance to the Nexar Prime system and engage the Vorthon fleet. We destroy them completely. No enemy ship is to escape. No prisoner offers will be accepted. This is a war of extinction, and we will be the ones doing the exterminating." He paused, letting his words sink in. The Council species have suffered for 7 years under the Vorthon assault. They have lost trillions of their people. They have watched their civilization crumble before an enemy they could not understand and could not fight. That ends today. We are humanity. We do not run. We do not surrender. We fight until our enemies are dust or we are dead. Those are the only options. The fleet acknowledged with a wave of confirmations. Engines powered up across thousands of ships. Navigation systems plotted courses through hyperspace. Weapons were loaded and shields were charged. Terra's Vengeance led the way, its massive hyperspace drives tearing open a hole in reality itself. The rest of the fleet followed in perfect formation, disappearing into the swirling tunnel of faster-than-light travel. In seconds, 6,000 human warships had vanished from Council space, leaving behind only the shocked observers on Nexus Station. The journey to Nexar Prime took 3 hours. The Vorthon detected the approaching fleet when it was still 20 minutes away. Their sensors, designed to track the slow and clumsy movements of Council ships, struggled to process what they were seeing. The incoming vessels were moving faster than anything the Vorthon had encountered before. Their formation was tight and disciplined, not the scattered groups that Council forces always presented. And their energy signatures were massive, indicating weapons and shields far beyond anything in the Vorthon database. The Vorthon fleet commander, a being whose name translated roughly to "he who consumes without end," ordered his ships to defensive positions around the primary space station of Nexar Prime. His 900 ships formed a spherical formation, weapons ready, confident in their superiority. In 7 years of warfare, the Vorthon had never lost a major engagement. They had never faced an enemy who could match their coordination and firepower. They had never fought humans. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in attack formation, already firing. The first wave of missiles launched before the ships had fully materialized. 10,000 projectiles screamed through the void, their warheads carrying enough explosive force to crack mountains. The Vorthon point defense systems activated, shooting down hundreds of incoming missiles, but hundreds more got through. Explosions blossomed across the Vorthon formation like flowers of fire and death. Before the Vorthon could respond, the human ships were among them. This was something the Council had never attempted, something that violated every principle of space warfare that the Vorthon understood. Ships were supposed to fight at range, exchanging fire across vast distances until one side was destroyed or retreated. No one engaged in close combat. The risk was too great, the chaos too difficult to control. Humans did not care about risk. Humans did not fear chaos. Humans embraced it. The destroyers and frigates dove into the Vorthan formation, their smaller size allowing them to slip between the larger enemy ships. They fired constantly, their weapons blazing in all directions, targeting engines and weapons arrays and sensor clusters. Vorthan ships tried to track them, but the humans moved too fast, changed direction too quickly, fought with a reckless aggression that the Vorthan could not predict. The cruisers followed behind, their heavier weapons punching through Vorthan armor with brutal efficiency. Human engineers had studied the limited data available on Vorthan ships and had designed weapons specifically to penetrate their hull materials. What had seemed impervious to Council weapons melted like wax under human assault. And then the dreadnoughts opened fire. The main guns of a human dreadnought could accelerate a projectile to 95% of the speed of light. At such velocities, even a relatively small mass carried energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. When 12 dreadnoughts fired simultaneously at the center of the Vorthan formation, the result was apocalyptic. The Vorthan command ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive thorn-shaped vessel bristling with weapons. The next moment there was nothing but expanding gas and fragments of debris. The ships around it were caught in the blast wave, their shields overwhelmed, their hulls crumpling like paper. He who consumes without end was dead before he even understood what was happening. The battle lasted 47 minutes. At the end, not a single Vorthan ship remained intact. Some had been destroyed outright. Others had been crippled and then systematically finished off by human boarding parties who showed no interest in taking prisoners. The Vorthan survivors fought to the last, as was their nature, but they fought beings who understood violence better than they ever had. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of Terra's Vengeance, watching the tactical display update as the final enemy contacts were eliminated. Around him, his crew cheered and celebrated, releasing the tension that came with any battle. But Chen himself remained quiet, his eyes already looking beyond this victory to what came next. "Set course for the Vorthan homeworld," he ordered. "We're not done yet." The fleet regrouped, counted its losses, and prepared to move again. They had destroyed 900 enemy ships at the cost of 37 of their own. By any military standard, it was an overwhelming victory. But Chen knew that the real test was still ahead. The Vorthan homeworlds would be heavily defended. The enemy would be fighting for their very survival. That was fine with Chen. So would humanity. Captain Rodriguez approached with updated intelligence reports. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from several Vorthan-occupied worlds. The slave populations are rising up against their captors. The Vorthan garrison forces are being overwhelmed." Chen allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Have our fastest ships respond to any requests for assistance. We'll liberate every world we can on our way to the Vorthan core." "And the Vorthan themselves? Some of them are trying to surrender as well." Chen's smile faded. He thought about the trillions of Council citizens who had been killed or enslaved. He thought about the 7 years of suffering that the galaxy had endured. He thought about the Vorthan nature, their complete inability to show mercy or accept defeat with honor. "We do not accept surrender from those who would never offer it themselves," he said coldly. "Continue the advance." The fleet jumped to hyperspace once more, leaving behind the burning wreckage of what had been the Vortan's greatest military concentration. In Council space, news of the victory was just beginning to spread. Beings who had known only defeat for 7 years were starting to hope again. The war was not over. But for the first time, the end was in sight. The news of Nexar Prime spread across the galaxy faster than the ships that carried it. Communication relays that had been silent for years suddenly came alive with transmissions. Refugee fleets that had been running for half a decade stopped their desperate flight. Resistance cells on occupied worlds received the word through hidden channels and began to plan uprisings. The Vorthan had been defeated, not in a small skirmish, not in a tactical retreat that could be spun as a strategic withdrawal. They had been annihilated. 900 of their warships destroyed in less than an hour by a species that the Council had dismissed as primitive savages. On Nexus Station, High Chancellor Morveth received continuous updates from observers embedded with the human fleet. Each report was more incredible than the last. The humans were not simply fighting the Vorthan, they were hunting them. Every pocket of resistance was tracked down and eliminated. Every convoy was intercepted and destroyed. Every outpost was breached and cleared with brutal efficiency. "They fight like nothing we have ever seen," reported Commander Tereth, who had been assigned as a liaison to Admiral Chen's flagship. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke through the communication link. "They do not hesitate. They do not negotiate. They do not show fear even when facing overwhelming odds. I watched a human boarding party assault a Vorthan station defended by twice their numbers. They took the station in 12 minutes. They lost 4 soldiers. The Vorthan lost everyone." Morveth listened in silence, his silver face expressionless. Around him, his advisors exchanged nervous glances. They had prayed for victory. Now they were beginning to wonder if they had invited something worse than the Vorthan into their galaxy. The human fleet reached the first Vorthan homeworld on the 3rd day after Nexar Prime. It was a dark planet, orbiting a dying red star, its surface covered in massive industrial complexes and military installations. Billions of Vorthan lived there, along with millions of enslaved beings from a dozen conquered species. The planet's defenses were formidable, including orbital weapons platforms, ground-based missile batteries, and a fleet of 300 ships that had been called back from the front lines. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display for exactly 2 minutes before issuing his orders. The attack began with the dreadnoughts. Their main guns fired in sequence, each shot precisely calculated to destroy a specific orbital platform. The weapon stations that had protected the Vorthan homeworld for generations vanished in seconds, their crews having no time to even understand that they were under attack. With orbital superiority established, the cruisers moved in to deal with the remaining fleet. The Vorthan ships fought with desperate courage, knowing that defeat meant the death of their world. But courage was not enough against opponents who had perfected the art of destruction over thousands of years of practice on each other. The space battle lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, the human fleet controlled the skies above the Vorthan homeworld. Now came the harder part. Admiral Chen opened a channel to the planet below. "This is Admiral James Chen of the Human Combined Fleet. You have 12 hours to release all enslaved populations and surrender unconditionally. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of all military and industrial facilities on your world. You will not be warned again." The Vorthan response came within minutes. It was not a surrender. Instead, the Vorthan leaders ordered the execution of every enslaved being on the planet. If they were to fall, they would ensure that none of their captives survived to be liberated. Death squads were dispatched to the labor camps and slave facilities that dotted the planet's surface. They managed to kill approximately 12,000 beings before the humans responded. Admiral Chen did not waste time with ultimatums or negotiations. He simply gave the order, and within seconds, human dropships were falling through the atmosphere like a metal rain. Inside each ship, soldiers in powered armor checked their weapons and prepared for ground combat. They were Marines, the elite ground forces of humanity, trained since childhood for exactly this kind of operation. The Vorthan had never faced human infantry. They had never experienced what happened when beings who had spent millennia perfecting violence decided to apply that knowledge in person. The Marines hit the ground firing. Their armor made them nearly invulnerable to Vorthan's small arms. Their weapons could punch through the hardest materials the Vorthan could produce. They moved through the enemy positions like ghosts of death, appearing from unexpected angles, striking with overwhelming force, and disappearing before the Vorthan could organize a response. The death squads were the first priority. Human special operations teams, smaller units with even more advanced equipment, dropped directly onto the slave facilities. They killed every Vorthan guard they encountered and secured the enslaved populations before the executions could continue. Many of the rescued beings had never seen a human before. They did not understand who these strange, small creatures were or why they fought with such terrifying intensity. They only knew that, for the first time in years, they were free. The ground campaign lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the military and industrial heart of the Vorthan civilization had been reduced to rubble. Their armies were destroyed. Their leaders were dead or captured. Their weapons factories were burning craters. But the residential areas, where the common Vorthan civilians lived, were largely untouched. This distinction confused the council observers. They had expected the humans to destroy everything, to wipe out the Vorthan species entirely in revenge for what they had done. Instead, the humans seemed to draw a clear line between those who fought and those who did not. Admiral Chen explained it during a communication with Chancellor Morveth. "We are not monsters, Chancellor. We kill those who threaten us or others. We do not slaughter civilians who have no ability to fight. That is the difference between justice and genocide. Our ancestors learned that lesson the hard way. We do not intend to forget it." The remaining Vorthan homeworlds fell in quick succession. Some surrendered when they saw the fate of the first. Others fought and were defeated. In each case, the pattern repeated. Military forces destroyed, slave populations liberated, civilians spared. The entire campaign, from first contact to final victory, lasted 11 hours. 11 hours to end a war that had consumed 7 years and trillions of lives. When the last Vorthan military installation had been neutralized, Admiral Chen ordered his fleet to stand down. The guns fell silent. The Marines returned to their ships. The galaxy, for the first time in nearly a decade, was at peace. Chancellor Morveth requested a personal meeting with the Admiral. It took place on Nexus Station, in the same chamber where Chen had first presented his offer of assistance. The room seemed different now, somehow smaller. The council representatives who gathered there looked at the human delegation with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "You have saved us," Morveth said quietly. "You have done what we could not do, what we did not even know how to begin doing. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Chen stood before the council, his uniform still carrying traces of dust from a dozen battlefields. He looked older than he had just days ago, the weight of command visible in the lines around his eyes, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "We did not do this for payment, Chancellor. We did it because it was right, because we saw innocent beings suffering and we had the power to stop it. That is reason enough." "But you could have demanded anything," Morveth pressed. "Territory, resources, political power. Why ask for nothing?" Chen was silent for a moment, considering his answer. "Because that is not who we want to be. We have enough darkness in our history. We have enough blood on our hands from our own conflicts. When we finally reached for the stars, we promised ourselves that we would be better, that we would use our terrible gifts to protect rather than conquer. This was our first test of that promise." He met the Chancellor's eyes directly. "We intend to keep it." The Council voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership in their union. It was a remarkable gesture, given that just weeks ago they had considered humans too dangerous to contact. But the calculus had changed. The galaxy was rebuilding, and the species that had saved it deserved a place at the table. Admiral Chen accepted on behalf of his species, though he warned the Council that humans would take time to adjust to galactic society. They would need to learn new customs, new ways of thinking, new approaches to problems that did not involve violence. It would not be easy for a species that had known conflict for so long, but they would try. That was all anyone could ask. The Vorthon remnants were confined to their homeworlds under human supervision. Some council members argued for harsher punishment, even extinction, but Chen opposed this strongly. We fought them because they were a threat. They are no longer a threat. Killing them now would make us no better than they were. We will watch them. We will prevent them from rebuilding their military, but we will not commit genocide. Over the following months, the galaxy slowly returned to normal. Refugee fleets dispersed back to their homeworlds. Damaged worlds began the long process of reconstruction. Species that had been on the edge of extinction started to recover, their populations growing for the first time in years. The humans integrated themselves into galactic society with surprising grace. Their violent nature, which had so frightened the Council species, proved to be more controlled than anyone had expected. Human colonies were established on worlds that had been too dangerous for other species to settle. Human security forces provided protection for trade routes and vulnerable populations. Human engineers helped rebuild the infrastructure that the Vorthon had destroyed. And yet, there was always something different about the humans, something that set them apart from the other species of the Council. Ambassador Crix of the Velari once asked a human diplomat to explain it. They were attending a celebration on a world that had been liberated from Vorthon control, watching as former slaves danced and sang songs of freedom that they had been forbidden to perform for years. "Your species seems so balanced," Crix said, his compound eyes watching the festivities. "You can be so brutal in war, yet so gentle in peace. How do you contain such contradictions within yourselves?" The diplomat, a woman named Elena Vasquez, smiled at the question. "We are human," she said simply. "We contain all things. The capacity for great evil and the capacity for great good, the ability to destroy and the ability to create. We are not perfect beings. We are messy and complicated and often confused about our own nature." She turned to look at the dancing crowds, her expression softening. "But we try. Every day, we try to be better than we were before. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we fall back into old patterns of violence and hatred. But we always get back up and try again. That is the human way." Crix considered this for a long moment. "And the war? The violence you showed against the Vorthon? Was that the darkness within you, or the light?" "Both," Elena replied without hesitation. "We fought because we needed to fight. We killed because killing was necessary to stop a greater evil. We showed no mercy because mercy would have been weakness against an enemy that understood nothing else." She paused, her gaze distant. "But we took no pleasure in it. Every soldier who returned from that campaign carries scars, not all of them visible. We do not celebrate the killing. We only celebrate the lives we saved by doing it." Years passed. The galaxy healed. The Vorthon, contained on their homeworlds, slowly began to change under human influence. It would take generations, perhaps centuries, but there were signs of progress. Young Vorthon questioned the traditions of conquest that had defined their civilization. Some even began to seek peaceful contact with the species their ancestors had tried to destroy. Chancellor Morveth, now ancient even by Thessian standards, gave his final speech before retirement. He spoke of the dark years under Vorthon assault, of the hopelessness that had gripped the galaxy, of the moment when all seemed lost. And then he spoke of the humans. "They came to us in our darkest hour," he said, his voice cracking with age but still carrying the weight of his wisdom. "They offered their terrible gifts in service of peace. They fought for us, bled for us, and asked for nothing in return. Many of us feared them. Some of us still do. But I have come to understand something about these strange, violent, compassionate beings. They are not our protectors because they are strong. They are our protectors because, despite their strength, they choose to protect rather than conquer. That choice, made every day by every human I have known, is the most remarkable thing I have witnessed in my long life. He paused, looking out at the assembled representatives from across the galaxy. Human faces were scattered among them now, fully integrated members of the galactic community. A war that lasted years was ended in hours, Morveth continued. Not because humans were more powerful than the Vorthon, though they were. Not because humans were better tacticians, though they are. It ended so quickly because humans understand something that we had forgotten, that the Vorthon never knew. Violence is terrible. War is hell. But there are things worth fighting for. And when you fight for something worthy, when you fight with purpose and conviction and the willingness to sacrifice everything for those you protect, no enemy can stand against you. The old chancellor smiled, a rare expression on his silver face. We thought we were civilized because we had abandoned violence. The humans taught us that true civilization is not the absence of the capacity for violence, but the wisdom to use it only in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. They are warriors who hate war, killers who value life, destroyers who build. In all my years, I have never met a species so perfectly contradictory, and I have never been more grateful that they chose to be our friends. Admiral James Chen died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 97, on a quiet colony world far from the battlefields where he had made his name. His funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the council, including a delegation of young Vorthon who had grown up under human supervision and had learned to see the universe differently than their ancestors. On his grave, they placed a simple inscription: "He fought so others would not have to." It was perhaps the most human sentiment in the galaxy.